Welcome back to the Cyclone Play the Fight Song Perspective, brought to you by Play the Fight Song college football show. More transitioning to a college football show more than a podcast. But that being said, follow us for all of your college football needs throughout the off season, where we have a weekly show, usually on Tuesdays, and then dropping on Apple and Spotify podcasts, usually every Thursday for you guys. But you're tuning in tonight to the Iowa State Fan Perspective. My name is Jake. If you're tuning in for the first time, subscribe. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully you're finding something to do during this off-season time. We're going to buy you some time and give you some stuff to talk about. I'm joined by my co-host, my younger brother, Justin. Justin will give us a little bit of good insight. Justin had a chance to get to the game, spring game this weekend.
It was more practice.
Yeah. The word around town is it was a practice. Would you consider it even a scrimmage, or was it just a practice?
It was practice.
It was practice.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it a scrimmage.
Was that because you showed up at 11 o'clock instead of the 10:15 time when everybody else got rolling?
Yeah, apparently. Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't expecting that. They said 11, so I showed up at 11. They're already running plays.
You know, I respect Matt Campbell and all that he does, and I love what he does for the program. But, I never considered Matt Campbell a liar. At least when he tells me 11 o'clock, I'm going to be there. Now they're getting started at 10:15. Kind of shady if I'm not going to lie. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not trying to aggravate and call Coach Campbell shady. Honestly,
apparently they couldn't handle the cold temps like some of us tailgating out in the parking lot could.
Yeah, so let's start there. We're going to cover everything, guys. We're going to cover the spring recap, kind of the spring game a little bit. Kind of some things to talk about heading into the summer, heading into the real off season, and then into fall camp, as well as some recent news that we always cover with the Cyclones. But Justin, give us a little bit of insight before we dive into it too much. What was Saturday like, other than just being really damn cold?
It was good. It was honestly pretty similar to last year's experience. I know too many of the listeners probably weren't there for that, but I know you were. So, I mean, it was more of just an offense versus defense thing. Didn't really feel like they're running any certain units. It was kind of just a lot of guys out there, what it felt like. I was trying to kind of follow along on the roster to see like if they were trying to like get any certain looks, but it didn't really feel like that. They're kind of just getting some offensive reps against defensive reps, and they didn't even run too many situational stuff. It didn't seem like. It was kind of just first to fourth down. If they didn't get it, they'd kick a field goal, which we missed a lot of those. That wasn't very cool.
That was one of the headlines.
Yeah. Not as many takeaways as I thought we were going to have. The defense was swarming really well, so that was good to see. And like they said, with Lee, the young freshman, he was the only one who was kind of out there for every single play. So he got a lot of reps. That was good to see.
I think he was one of the only running backs. We'll dive into who kind of played, who didn't, and some of the other stuff. I know kicking was a big concern. I don't know if it should be a concern in April, especially when it was like 40 degrees on Saturday.
Yeah, it was a cold, windy, cloudy day, and I showed up at 11 thinking it was going to start at 11, and it was already going by then, and then by 11:50 they were wrapping up, and everyone went home. So I was like, all right. At least I got to see the guys play a little bit.
Did Rocco play at 10:15? I know, like some of the skill
didn't play after 11 o'clock. I never saw him take a snap.
I know. I knew that. I didn't know if you had heard. I haven't heard anything, but I was wondering at that 10:15, was anybody even in the stadium at that point?
No. So we were obviously out in the parking lot tailgating because it's a big game. You don't want to miss the spring game.
Yeah, you don't lose the spring game.
I saw they started playing kind of like one of their like hype videos around like 10:30, and I was like, oh, I wonder if they're like just going through the motions, like, because some schools do that for their spring game, stuff like that.
Sure.
I was like, I wonder if we should go in, and we went in at it was like 10:50 when we walked in. They're already running plays. I was like, oh. So I don't know if they actually
minutes of action.
So I don't know if they actually did. They say they actually started at 10:15.
I think so. It was around that time. Yeah, okay. They had been going for.
There could not have been too many people in there. People didn't really start going in until 10:30.
I think that's kind of what they wanted to do. They wanted to. I don't know. Maybe they were just spending it getting warmed up. Who knows? But
Yeah.
we'll circle back to that. We want to
Yep.
cover some things that have been going on. Obviously, the transfer portal window, not only for basketball, but for football, is back open. We are in the spring cycle. Not really a ton of news with Iowa State there. That it's a really good thing. I think that's something you can expect. I think that's something Iowa State tried to handle during the winter cycle. But let's get started. I want to cover some news. First of all, 2 commitments since we last talked to you guys, I think a month ago. The 2025 class continues to just add nice pieces slowly but surely. Most recently, I want to get this right. Charlie Wolben, the 3-star defensive end out of DeSoto, Kansas. I believe he committed even last week. This was very recent. Had some decent offers. Obviously, Midwest Division I talent, Nebraska, Kansas State. Some teams that were looking at him. Even maybe the University of Iowa could have, I think, was looking at him. So a pretty good win to win a kid out in the Midwest, to win over those schools that you're competing against every single year is always a good thing. And then secondly, this one was more of shortly after we saw you guys last. Zazavian Robinson, Zay Robinson is what they call him. He's a 3-star wide receiver / athlete from West Des Moines Valley, right here next to Ames. This one, while he's not huge as a 3-star or a caliber recruit, he's not a 4 or 5-star. This is just really exciting because I think, guys, if you know this kid, he's one of the best athletes in the state. He's going to start at the receiver position, but it wouldn't surprise me if they even switched him to defensive back or put him out there on some special teams and stuff. He can do almost anything. He's one of the best basketball players in the state. West Des Moines Valley, for those who don't know, won back-to-back state titles with Curtis Stinson Jr., another former Cyclone name, rings a bell. So this kid, really athletic. I think he's going to be really good, and I think Iowa State's going to find a spot for him wherever it is down the road. And this one, I think Iowa was going after him hardcore, so this was a really good pickup for Iowa State. This puts Iowa State as the 32nd ranked recruiting class in 2025 right now. They keep adding nice pieces, maybe somewhere along the lines they pick up a couple 4-stars. I think you could find this class being amongst the top of the Big 12 now that you're not competing against Texas and Oklahoma in recruiting. So that was good news. Hopefully we see some more additions more over the summer. I continue to love this class more and more as the picks come along. Second news, I did want to highlight it, and because people were talking about it, and I think it's interesting. And honestly, I am happy for the kid. Hunter Deckers, Iowa State's quarterback 2 years ago. It's been announced that he was already enrolled at Iowa Western, the community college in Council Bluffs, over this semester. For those who don't follow along in JUCO football, I'm pretty sure. I mean, they were in the national title last year. I know that for a fact. I don't remember if they won. They were playing East Mississippi. I was watching that game. So he's going to probably the best JUCO in the entire country. And I couldn't think of a better place where he probably wants to restart his career. The interesting fact about this commitment is he's came out and said that he will not try to go back into the NCAA or even the NAIA route, and that he will just try to play professionally. UFL, CFL, NFL, gets on a practice squad. Who knows? The guy's got talent. Like, I think that was one thing Iowa State fans knew. The talent was there. It was kind of everything else that surrounded the 2022 now. In that entire season, that was kind of just a mess. But Justin, when you first saw this one, any initial thoughts?
Dude likes to take chances. He's a gunslinger. He's going to bet on himself, some may say. I like it.
We should have disclosed before the podcast. I didn't know if we were going to make any betting.
All jokes aside, I actually think he'll be pretty good there. And who knows what kind of opportunities he'll have after that. But I think being at Iowa Western, a high-end JUCO like that, and like you said, he's got the skill, and I know he's a very competitive guy. And at that JUCO level, you kind of got to have that dog in you. And I don't know. I could see it going well for him.
I almost think you meant that, half of what you said. What I will say, I do feel bad for the kid in a sense that so I believe, from my understanding, he took a plea deal or like tried to, I don't know, he's tried to fight it, basically before the state dropped all of the charges. So now he's kind of stuck between fighting this, I think, with the NCAA and the state, while the rest of the guys, I mean, you saw Deshaun Hanukkah transferred to Kansas. He was eligible to play. He's actually hurt for the rest of the year, but he was going to be able to play. And some other guys that had gotten out of that situation are getting their eligibility back in the NCAA, but now he kind of gets stuck in a crappy situation. So I do hope he kills it over there. And I think it would be one of those David Irving moments where maybe some weird Monday Night Football game 4 years down the road and they do the starting lineups and he goes Hunter Deckers, Iowa Western, does that kind of feel like where this is going?
I don't know. I don't think you can rule anything out. I mean, like you said, made a pretty stupid decision, but did end up getting a raw deal. So I'm excited to actually see him get another opportunity. Hey, maybe we'll be able to see him play for Rocco's dad in the UFL.
Yeah, I think maybe we should that should be a connection next year. I'll start watching more UFL. I have been getting into it a little bit.
They've got an Iowa State pipeline down there in St. Louis.
They do. All right, to the next piece of news. Carson Willich tore his ACL in a press conference. For Coach Campbell said last week he will be out for the year. This is the only significant injury news that I've seen on that front. Obviously, we know of the names that didn't play in the spring game, and that could be for a multitude of reasons, battling some minor injuries, but this was the only big one, Campbell said. And this is a tough one. Willich was a guy who saw a lot of good snaps last season at the linebacker spot in a young group that could use more depth. So this was an injury that I don't think this linebacking group can really afford at this point, but there are some names that have been popping out in spring ball that I think could get a chance from this injury, but feel bad for the kid. I think he even, from what I know from his history, I think he injured his other knee. I don't want to say he tore his ACL, but he injured his other knee in high school. So little setback. He's still young. I think he was going to be a redshirt sophomore this year. So he's got a lot of future ahead of him, but that's the only injury news on Iowa State's front here in April. And then last thing I want to get to before we get into the spring talk, no uniform updates. Weren't we going to expect that? We got the Jack Trice uniforms unveiled last spring game. Still no news on our stripes other than some cool posters, I guess we got. So yeah. I don't. You got any? Are you hearing anything?
No, I'm not. I was kind of expecting a little uniform reveal, kind of like they did last year, but kind of like we touched on at the beginning, it really felt like they weren't trying to make this an event or anything. They weren't trying to do anything special. They were kind of just getting in and getting out. And it feels like if they would have like dropped like the new uniforms during that time, it kind of would have made those seem like a little less special than I think. Not like they're trying to be super special with them, but like it just would have kind of taken away the value of it if I think they would have chose Saturday for it. So I don't know when they'll unveil those, but give us something to look forward to, I guess.
One thing they could be leaning towards, they've been, and they just announced this a couple of weeks ago, the 50th anniversary of Jack Trice Stadium is this year. They modeled the theme for the poster after it. I wonder if that stripe has any indication, those three stripes have any indication of the 50th anniversary. I don't know. It's kind of something to lean towards. They're really diving into that. They're putting that brand kind of on everything on their socials right now. So that kind of got my head thinking. I don't know if they're kind of going more towards a throwback. Stripes on the sides on the jerseys. It seems more throwback to me.
A little bit, yeah. Especially going with like the brighter color red too. Yeah, as you can kind of see in the uniforms. And I'm not like looking off in the distance here. I'm staring at the poster on the wall, trying to see if they've got any like hints on it. I've got the new poster already hung up, but doesn't really seem like it. So I don't know. I mean, the uniforms, I think they'll be cool. I know you guys touched on it in like the main pod. So I'm not really getting my hopes about it too much. It kind of just seems like that could be the thing for Iowa State in the Campbell era, kind of just like revamping the uniforms every couple of years, 3-4 years, something like that. I would like to see us get like a throwback, but like kind of more than just like a one-time thing like the Jack Trice uniforms were last year. I'd kind of like to see something that we can kind of stick with and have a little more identity with.
100%. And it's also April. So
yeah,
we're fetching for something to talk about here. And I'm trying to envision what I'm going to be seeing in September. And then the last piece of news, transfer portal updates. We talked about it. The window's open right now. 3 departures since post-spring, guys who really haven't seen significant playing time. Wide receiver Aiden Bitter, offensive lineman Anthony Smith, safety Norris Davis. Sorry, I think Davis was a freshman last year from Tampa. Aiden Bitter had that really good catch in the Iowa game 2 years ago. But other than that, not a lot of significant playing time between those 3. No transfer portal additions at this point, and there's no rumors for Iowa State going after anybody right now. We'll kind of touch on that in a little bit, but something to also keep in mind as we move forward with about a week or so left in that window. All right, let's get into the post-spring stuff, the spring game in general, spring practice, scrimmage, whatever you want to call it. Before we dive into the big headlines, I wanted to let Campbell kind of talk on it a little bit. This clip comes from Cyclone Fanatic. It's just basically his brief thoughts from Saturday and what to take away from it.
To see some other of these young guys who could step up and perform and who could go play. Well, today's different just because we got a lot of guys out and trying to see some different combinations of people. But honestly, we've had a great spring. Really fun for this football team. Again, a lot of young guys, got a lot of great opportunities. It'll be fun to watch this video, see who continue to really stack 15 great practices. But, a lot more depth than we've had. Going to have a lot of competition going into fall camp, and really a great opportunity to finish off spring practice for us.
Can fans take anything away from the offense today?
No. No, Dylan Lee, talented. I think he had a really great spring. A lot of our offensive guys were out for, just various reasons, and we wanted to see some other of these young guys who could step up and perform and who could go play. But, offense will be in really good shape by the time we get to the fall.
One of the better Matt Campbell answers from his always great answers in his press conferences or his post game, and just no, there's nothing to take away from this. I do like his confidence. He seems very confident with where this offense will be come September. So as someone who went to the game on Saturday, Justin, that answer's got to hurt a little bit that you may have spent all that time just for absolutely nothing. But right. I do think it's good for fans to realize none of what you saw on Saturday will really be with any significance. But let's talk about
it is nice to hear that from him after watching that, because if you were someone who was there and watching what was going on, it was a little concerning.
That's what God invented spring ball for. That's what God invented the spring practice for. Let's go into the headlines. If we want to talk about somebody, it's all over socials. It's all over the premium and Patreon stuff. Dylan Lee, your quote unquote offensive MVP of the day. 80 yards on the ground. He had a touchdown. He was one of the only backs that really got significant playing time. No Carson Hansen, no Abu Sama, no Jalen Jackson, the Eastern Michigan transfer. So Lee got all of the carries. I think Campbell was pleased with this. I will note one thing for the fans. Just because he performed well, I'm not guaranteeing that he's going to be playing a ton on Saturdays come September. This running back room's really loaded. Go back and listen to Coach Campbell's press conference last week. And he really talks about Lee's making strides. He's really good. He could be a workhorse eventually, but there's a lot of spots right now, and there's a lot of depth, and there's just not a lot of spots. What I do see out of Campbell, out of his running backs each and every single year, it seems like in September, he starts off with 3 or 4 guys. But by the time he gets into the meat of the season in October, it's going to be 2, no more than 2. And I just don't know if you might see Lee get in some snaps against North Dakota, which is great. But I wouldn't expect much more than him. Justin, was there anything that stood out to this kid when you watched him run the football on Saturday?
Not really. I mean, he ran the ball really hard, which was good. There was not a lot of energy on the offense at all. A lot of the energy was kind of on the defensive side, but he seemed to have some pretty good vision too, because to be honest, the O-line was not doing very well.
A lot of room.
No, and it's not like guys were trying to light each other up, but he was having dudes in his face kind of like right away, kind of something we're accustomed to with Iowa State running backs, and he was making plays out there. I mean, yeah, you don't want to hype up like a spring game performance too much, but he definitely wasn't handed anything easy, and he seemed to be out there making plays. So it was good to see from a young guy, even if he's the only healthy guy right now. Like, those are the things you're going to have to do if you're a young freshman trying to carve out playing time.
And then I think another headline from Saturday, and this was expected. I think people were interested to see where this was at. I think it was the matchup between JJ Cole and Connor Moberly. I don't know if you want to call it a matchup or a duel, but between him and then the Hughes kid, and I think the walk-on even got some snaps as well. There was 20 passes total taken between the four quarterbacks, but it comes down to the two kids from the Des Moines area. From what I heard, and Justin, maybe you can elaborate on it, it sounds like Cole's a lot farther ahead than Moberly as far as the number 2 spot. I mean, that'd be expected. Cole was in this spot last year where he enrolled early, and we kind of thought the same, where he was like, man, this kid just looks like he just graduated high school 2 months ago. So anything between the two, how did JJ Cole look to you? How did the freshman Moberly look to you? Anything that stood out to you between those guys?
Yeah, there really wasn't any plays like made in the passing game, like kind of the whole time. So, I mean, it's not really like any of the guys stood out, but we were there and we saw Cole last year, and you could tell like he was kind of antsy, kind of hopping around back there. You could tell he just looked a lot more poised and a lot more comfortable, which is a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
And same with the other guys too. Didn't really look like anyone was too nervous in there. There's no one really, yeah, like we said, no really making any plays. I don't know if I remember like a single pass farther than like 10 yards downfield. Completely honest with you.
So what happens when it's football weather and it's 40 degrees outside.
Yeah, so there really wasn't a whole lot to show, but that was kind of the biggest thing I was looking at with Cole. I was trying to like watch his feet, kind of seeing like how comfortable he looked, and he seemed to be sitting in there a lot better. So I know for a spring game, that's not a whole lot to say, but it is some growth, which is
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. Especially we're a year removed from when he was barely 18 years old, and now he's starting to fulfill his role as a backup quarterback for Rocco, who you never know. God forbid we never have to see an injury, but a backup quarterback sometimes can be one of the most important players on your team. And I think the biggest win right now, and knocking on wood as the window is still open, for JJ Cole to stick around and not enter the transfer portal after Saturday or when the window opened is a huge win for Iowa State. They didn't have to focus on honestly keeping him around. They have Mansky coming in a couple of years. They have Moberly right now as a freshman. They didn't have to spend a ton of time and really owe it to him to try to keep him around with Rocco just being a sophomore. But he's invested in the program. He could go anywhere right now and get a good shot. He's got a huge frame, and he is talented. So I think the biggest win is keeping Cole around, and I think he loves Coach Campbell. I think he loves the staff, and who knows? Who knows what can happen? And we may be one play away from needing him to get us through a season. So I think that's huge in that essence, and it's good to see him take that next step. The last thing I wanted to highlight from Saturday, the kicking game, because obviously isn't that important, and that's what every Iowa State fan wants to talk about. Your kicker of the day, Kyle Conrady. I really hope I got that right, but I feel like I didn't. Freshman from Dubuque. I don't think we expected this guy to go out and make kicks for Iowa State right now. He's not the FAU transfer. He's not Jace Gilbert from a couple of years ago. He's more of a punter. Maybe he's lower on the depth chart. And there's another guy I'm missing on the top of my head right now. And I mean, at least going into the spring game, I was not hearing his name, Conrady's name, getting thrown around as the kicker of the day. Maybe that was another due to injury, but he sounded okay out of all of them. He was 4 or 5, and I think he hit a couple of 40-yarders. So who knows? It's funny and kind of silly to talk about in April, but how important last year was Chase Contreras for Iowa State, and he's got a chance to get a practice squad spot after the draft this weekend, and he arguably won Iowa State a couple of games. So while it's kind of silly to still talk about, having a guy who can consistently kick the ball and get us through the fall will ultimately be the difference, I think, between a 7-win season and maybe a 9 or 10-win season. And Justin, you're shaking your head. I think you can totally agree with that.
Yeah, you say it's silly, but like especially with Iowa State football and like the amount of missed kicks we have seen over the years, and
Yep.
I mean it matters, and especially with how tight the Big 12 this year is gonna be, and like how small the margin of victories are gonna be, it is definitely going to matter. So like, yeah, having someone that we can rely on and trust in spots, not like someone who's got to be making deep 40 yarders or anything like that, but at least someone we can trust is huge.
Absolutely. And all right, that being said, spring camp wraps up. They're done with their 15 practices. I think they get a focus on finals now before returning in the end of May, early June for a huge strength and conditioning offseason, and then obviously fall camp in August. Here are some names I want you guys to look out for. Some names that I heard popped out in the spring practice. Again, you got to go listen to Coach Campbell's press conference a couple of weeks ago. He gives some really good insight on who really impressed over spring ball. The first being, we have a picture right here at the line of scrimmage. I think we got to start with Kennard Snyder. This was a guy who I heard had great hands and was really aggressive at the defensive end position, not only in spring ball, but on Saturday as well. This is the Louisiana transfer, Louisiana Monroe transfer. For those who remember, I think this could be the next great pass rusher for Iowa State. I really do. The way they talk about him, I think they're really excited about him. He's not just a guy who contains. This is a guy they want to get after the quarterback, and I think he's going to be a good pass rusher in the Big 12. Um, this is huge. I think the defensive line needs to take a step up this year. I think that's a group on defense that needs to. I need to see improvement. I want to see a little more physicality from, and that's where I want to switch to in the interior of the defensive line. Another guy who Matt Campbell has now mentioned twice. One being the post game last Saturday, and then the other being that press conference 2 weeks ago, is Amir Hawk. He is a redshirt freshman defensive tackle who's 6'2", 300 pounds. I don't think Matt Campbell would bring up his name had he not really showed out in spring ball. Apparently in the scrimmage 2 weeks ago, he was an absolute monster. Kennard Snyder's really going to help on the pass rush, but I thought our interior defensive line last year lacked depth. And you remember, you got J.R. Singleton back. You have Dominic Orange. This is a guy you can rotate as a 3 or 4 spot, who's going to make a huge impact if he succeeds and if he keeps progressing into the fall. And not to mention Tyler Onyetum again on the outside with Kennard Snyder. So I am a lot more excited about the defensive line. Justin, I think you can probably rave a little more about the defensive line just from our text we exchanged. Maybe it was more of a slight at the offensive line, but I think that has to do with a little bit of the defensive line making an improvement this spring as well.
Yeah, you could take it one way or the other, but the offensive line wouldn't have played like it did if the D line wasn't doing its job. And they looked really good. They were getting a good push up front. They were still getting some pressure on the quarterbacks there. And that was the biggest thing. Cause even if like they weren't really getting into the backfield, like none of the runs, none of the plays were getting past those guys past like the first yard. And the whole defense was swarming really well. So that was really good to see.
Yeah, and another thing, and you can see right there at the center spot, you see Jim Boniface. He was your starting center last year. I want to see who plays the starting position, the center position, come September, because Brendan Black got some run on Saturday, and then also Dylan Barrett, the Wisconsin transfer, has been known to projected like he's going to be in the mix. He was having some really good practices. So I'm really interested to see. There's 3 guys up for grabs at the center spot. It's a huge, important piece on the offensive line. And with a guy you returned with a lot of starts last year, to know that there's 2 more guys fighting for a spot, that's got to mean something as well. Back to the defensive side of the ball. Again, Matt Campbell brings this up in his press conference. The next Mike Rose, who could potentially be the next Mike Rose. Who would that be? That would be Caleb Bacon, I believe, sophomore linebacker from Lake Mills, Iowa, formerly a walk-on. He says that Caleb was taking the strides to be a Mike Rose type, an every down type of linebacker that can get sideline to sideline and won't just be a pass rushing linebacker like last year. Uh, again, it's April and you've got to find things to be excited about, but I really do think he means it when he says that he could be the next Mike Rose. And obviously that's a lot of pressure for Caleb, but I don't think he would say it without putting that pressure on him and having those high expectations. I think that's another thing the defensive could have used last year. And Caleb was around as well as Jack Sadowski, Will McLaughlin, Zach Lovett. But they lacked an alpha linebacker, I felt, last year, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. It felt like a young group. It didn't really feel like there was anyone kind of leading that like we're used to with Iowa State. So if he could assume that role, I think that would be really good, not just for his own development, obviously, but I think that like having a leader like that is really good for the other guys around him too.
100%. I think they kind of need it's cliche, but a warrior type, a guy you could rely on every down and in the fourth quarter of a Big 12 game. The next thing I want to highlight, well, we'll finish up the defensive side here. TJ Tampa's replacement. They wrote a nice article, the Des Moines Register did on the Cyclone Insider, talked about Darian Porter. You can expect Darian Porter to take that spot. The former wide receiver track star from Bettendorf. I think they're really excited about him taking this spot. Now, TJ Tampa, that's potential first round draft pick. That's maybe be a little bit of a stretch, but I think they're really excited. And I don't think they're expecting much of a drop off on the defensive staff with this kid coming in and replacing TJ, along with Jontez Williams, who was a young guy last year who got some good run and had some good snaps as well. The last piece I want to highlight going into the fall, the wide receiver room. I think this is the most exciting room. Obviously, everybody's talking about the progress that Rocco's making in spring ball, and I think that's something to be excited about, but he's got to throw the ball to somebody. And this wide receiver room, the more I think about it, I thought it wasn't, but I think it's easily a top 5, maybe a top 3 room in the Big 12. You have Jalen Knoll, who has assumed to be a great captain and a great leader over the offseason. You have Jaden Higgins, who I think has the potential to be a top 15, top 10 receiver in college football this season. And then you have the newcomers in Ben Ngoyi, the kid from Lincoln, and then Isaiah Alston, the tall, big Army transfer who has the playmaking abilities. I would assume, Justin, that this wide receiver room is pretty exciting to you as well. And is this a group that can lead Iowa State to a 9-win season? Is this a team that we don't really know. We're still in the unknown with the offensive line and the run game. Is this a group that can take that next level and consistently go for, 350, 400 yards a game? I mean, is that something Iowa State can rely on?
I think it can, and I kind of think it's going to need to be.
Yeah.
Honestly, because I mean, we've all watched last year and we watched where we were good and where we're not. And obviously next year is going to be a new team, but I don't think we're going to come into next year and believe we're going to be this ground and pound team that's going to win by churning out over 150 rush yards a game. Like, that's going to be nice. That's going to bring us to our top tier ceiling, but we're going to need to be consistent with the passing game, with those underneath routes and being able to stretch the defense over top. And that comes with having depth and guys we can count on, especially with Higgins and Knoll. We got to have reliable targets that we can get all the time, especially like those slants and attack in the middle of the field. And same with Bramer. You didn't mention him in there because I know he's tight end, but we're going to need to see more strides from him too. And I mean, we just listed 5 guys, and like, even if like 5 of them aren't hitting the top potential that we assume they're going to be, because no one's ever like is as good as we think they're going to be in the spring. But even if like 3 of those guys are like effective every down players, like, that's huge. That's going to be a big advantage that we have.
I'm really excited I think the running backs do have talent, but I think this could be a pass first team next year. No question.
It will be.
And we didn't even mention Daniel Jackson's name. Justin, of course, we didn't mention the tight ends. Like, there are so many weapons in the passing game with this football team. I think we could see a completely different style than we are used to at Iowa State going into next year. I know we kind of saw that towards the end of the year, but we didn't see it in the Iowa game or the Ohio game. It's really when they changed that philosophy kind of midway through the year. I think Iowa State fans can expect that the entire 2024 season. So that being said, when we put a bow and wrap up on our spring practice and our spring episode here, what's next for Iowa State? What can we expect? Justin, before we meet next, the spring transfer portal window will be closed. Is there anything or any position you think Iowa State should go after with a week or so remaining? Can I start off by saying no? not another offensive lineman. That's not going to solve anything. Is there
Yeah,
anything else besides that you want to see?
for sure. Honestly, at this point, adding an O lineman, I'm not sure would help that much. We obviously know how much of a need that is, but now's the time where they need to start developing consistency and like
Mhm.
kind of a camaraderie and finding their five group that
That's
works
exactly what I
together.
thought.
They were mixing up a lot of different guys this weekend, and you could tell that the chemistry just isn't really there yet. But it's April, so that's what that's for. And I'm
100%.
glad you shout out the D line because they did play really well and they looked like a good cohesive unit. But if I could say one position, I would probably say corner. I'm glad you shouted out Darian Porter there. I think he's got obviously really big shoes to fill, but like a senior now, redshirt senior, is he?
Yeah,
I don't know.
redshirt senior because he's using his 5th year. He came
Yep,
back for this.
seasoned guys. That's going to be great to have in the secondary, but we know how weak that position was for us last year, at least the lack of depth. So, I mean, anything they can do to help with that would be huge for us.
Yeah, that's you're a smart guy because everything I've been listening to right now is Iowa State's going to be going after secondary positions if there is any more additions before the end of the month. Specifically, I think at the safety spot, Iowa State could use some more depth because with Cooper and Verdone, I love those guys. Those guys are some of the best safeties in the Big 12. But when you hit that hard and you play that many downs, they're not going to last a full season.
Missed a lot of games last year already.
Yep. So if you can replace some downs in the middle of a game, maybe that saves those guys long term, and you can keep them on the field for longer periods of time down the stretch in November. So I think that's my one request. I think everything else, honestly, Campbell said that this is the hardest spring that they've ever had in his tenure here, and that could be coach speak, but I think he really does mean it because there is a lot of talent on this team, and we have all offseason to talk about it. But there's a lot of position battles. And I think Campbell's right now, he's testing the waters on what he saw. And I think that's why he played a lot of second and third stringers at this spring scrimmage on Saturday. There's a lot of talent here. And now it's just kind of finding out who's going to separate themselves and how is this team going to take that next step. And hey, man, Jeremiah Cooper said it last year, Big 12 championship, college football playoff. It's the expectation now with 12 teams. And when you have this many starters, 19 of them coming back next year, you got to separate yourself somehow. So that's what I really look forward to going more into the offseason. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We went a little longer, but we missed you, Justin. I'll get to you before we head out. Some things you can expect from us. So now spring ball is over. What can you expect from us the rest of the way going into September? A couple of things I have highlighted, Justin. I want to break down the Big 12 tiers for quarterbacks. We're going to break the quarterbacks down in the Big 12 into tiers. We're definitely doing that one. You mentioned the Cyclone draft in a text the other night.
Yeah.
We're going to do that. We're going to draft like an all-time offense one night and then an all-time defense one night. At least we're young guys, so we're going to try to keep it like 2000 to 2024 probably. So I'm sorry if you want the 1990 Cyclones. They were terrible anyway, so there's probably nobody you can add from there. And then we're gonna deep dive into the 2024 schedule and dive into the opponents a little more once the portal ends, once the teams are really solidified, and I'm excited for preview magazines, Justin. We finally get a damn preview magazine hopefully in this next month that I can start reading. So before we head out, any more thoughts before we jump into the summer off season?
Yeah, I do got one more thought. I'm glad that you touched on the D line and the defense as a whole. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to take away from this weekend, but Matt summed it up really well. But the defense did have a lot of energy, so that was good to see. And another thing that you could get from, I thought that video was really good, a really good summary of like what happened on Saturday. And the one thing that we didn't touch on is how good the Iowa State varsity football marching band sounded. Those guys were in midseason form. They were loud as can be. You could have let the elements get to them, but they sounded fantastic. So just wanted to shout out those guys.
They could play tomorrow. They want September to be next week already. They're always in midseason form. They're the best.
You get some of those third down chants going. It just gets me going. Ready for fall.
That was the difference between a spring scrimmage on Saturday and a spring game. That's why you can call it a spring game, because the marching band was there. That
is
exactly
accurate.
why. That's a great way to wrap this up. If going on 40 minutes. Sorry, we took a little longer than we supposed, but that's what we're here to do. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you guys listen the whole way, We love you guys. We appreciate your sicko fandom as much as we love to do it. Follow us along at Play the Fight Pod for all of your content throughout the offseason. We're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, where you're following us right now. Like and subscribe, as well as Twitter. Follow us on X as well. We post a bunch of great stuff, and Parks does a really good job with a lot of good graphics and things like that. Follow us along for our weekly live shows on YouTube every Tuesday night. That's it for us. We will see you guys probably in a few weeks. As always, in the meantime, you know what it is. Go Cyclones.